Good afternoon and welcome to Falun, host to the Nordic Ski World Championships last year, and this afternoon host for the men's 10-kilometre classic race. Mike Dixon together with myself, David Goldstrom. So here we are in Falun, as I said, the World Championship host from last year. But we never raced over 10 kilometres in classic style here. This is a very rare race and a very rare distance these days. And Mike, an interesting factor here in this time trial with a huge field is whether this short distance will actually suit the likes of Martin Jonsrud Sundby, the World Cup Tour leader, who's been the dominant figure both in freestyle and in classic.
He really has. He's been such a dominant character all season. I think he might be challenged certainly closer over the 10 kilometres. He was so dominant last weekend over the 50.
But before we get into today's race, a chance to rewind to Thursday and the classic sprint in Stockholm around the Royal Palace. And this is the way that the race unfolded, the final here with Mike's thoughts on it.
Well, this is how it panned out, and very happy to be at the high point. Krukov, who's back on form. But it's the big, giant figures, the Norwegians in red, who were leading and did lead up the first climb. And, of course, Fosley had looked so good, dominant most of the way through, but fatiguing towards the end. Hadestad destroying the rest of the field with only 150 to go, but on the right-hand side, as we look down the track, the Russian coming back so strong. And for his 5th ever victory across the line, and so happy, as he said in the press interview, so happy to be back at the top.
Yeah, he did indeed. He said, I'm back, and this is the man who was the Olympic champion in Vancouver in classic style. And as you can see, he doesn't win very often, but that was a really big comeback, and we now need to keep an eye on him for the rest of this season, and also with the Nordic Ski World Championships next season. Taking the scalp of Peder Northug in a sprint is no mean achievement.
And especially his turn of pace over the final 50. He completely took Hadestad and the great Northug by surprise.
So in the overall World Cup, in the rankings, of course, it's the Norwegian Martin Jonsrud Sundby who has such a commanding advantage. 670 points ahead over Finn Hågen Krogh of Norway. And here you have the statistics. 670, that's like having 6 clear competitions ahead. And again, it's 1, 2, 3 for Norway. Ustegov, the best of the non-Norwegians, with Dierhaug completing the top 5 there. So Norway rampant, and pretty rampant also in the distance rankings, where they've got the first 3, Sundby, Dierhaug and Shirota, the 1, 2, 3. And the races which give us a bit of a key to today's examination, the 15-kilometre in Ruka, right at the beginning of the season. Sundby was the runner-up there to Nicolas Dierhaug. And then in race number 5 in Toblach in the Tour de Ski, he won that one. That was over 15 kilometres. And then in Oberstdorf, another victory for the likes of Sundby in Val di Fiemme. So a couple of minutes to go here in Sweden to the start of the men's 10-kilometre classic race. And as you can see, the temperature's now dropping. The women's race, it warmed up to 0, but here's the journey, 2 times 5 kilometres.
Now look at this first climb, so easy first 100 metres, then it's all about climbing basically, right up to about 1,750 metres. The terrain back down into the stadium, without a doubt a whole lot easier, but still the occasional steep spike there in the map. And as they come round to the finish line, it's or the exchange, as I say, the passage back out onto the same track for a second time. And really today, I think, David, you've got to be careful pacing the first lap. If you take that first 1.75 over your comfort zone, you will suffer. towards the end.
I think the characteristic, Mike, is that there's no respite on this course. There's barely any flat, and now you can see the start list here with the racers starting at 30-second intervals. 93 competitors from 26 countries, so a really good turnout. Martin Jonsrud Sundby wearing bib number 58. He'll be starting in just under 30 minutes from now. And being where he is in the order, he's actually got a good call on the likes of Finn Krogh and Ustegov and Francesco De Fabiani of Italy, who's that young classic specialist. I think he could have a good race here. And my feeling is over 10 kilometres, whereas I thought the women's sprinters might have a chance with this snow falling and the soft conditions. I think this is really going to favour the distance men.
It is. There's a whole lot of strength required. You need your endurance to cope with this terrain. It's one of the tougher profiles that we see over 10 kilometres. Good to see Andrew Young, and just outside the top 30 in Stockholm on Thursday, but in very good shape.
But Andrew Musgrave missing this one.
Well, he is. He's going. I had a chat with Roy and Roy Young, and he's saying Andrew's building his distance phase back prior to the final stage over in Canada, and he's doing a 30-kilometre today, Norwegian Cup race, but will mostly double pole that just to keep the form and keep the strength in place.
Could be a sensible move. Both Musgrave and Young started with a lot of promise to the campaign, but it's petered out, and also one or two issues in terms of the waxing team, and I hope they can get that sorted out for Canada, because I think it's going to be really important. I think Muzzy could have a really good time out there if they plan it and get it right. And Andrew Young, I should say, he needs to get into the top 30 and qualify for the quarterfinals for the sprints, which he hasn't been doing in recent weeks. So here we are in Falun, a bit of deja vu as far as the weather is concerned. Mike Dixon alongside myself, David Goldstrom, and it really is a bit like last year, isn't it, Mike? You know, overcast, heavy skies, dank, that sort of really uncomfortable humidity that really gets into your bones.
Well, we didn't get much sunshine. I think there was only one morning where the sun came out as Chintsov heads out on his 10-kilometre journey, and what a pity, pathfinding up here up front and breaking his way through this, well, 15 minutes since the ski was tracked on, breaking through the new snowfall.
So the first of 93 competitors from 26 nations, and it'll be a good man who goes early to get a result, or indeed to get any World Cup points out of this race, because they have all the disadvantages. First of all, everybody's got the time checks on them. Secondly, this little bit of snow that's falling also could play its part, and it was noticeable, particularly even on Murderbacken, the amount of loose snow there was.
Very much so, and it will break up, and it's such a steep climb up Murderbacken that athletes will be going into the herringbone, therefore destroying the prepared and cut-in tracks.
Scott Patterson from the United States, maybe taking some inspiration from the two Americans, Sophie Caldwell and Jess Diggins, who finished in the top 10. Jess Diggins, a very solid 5th place, and on his way, the 24-year-old American, who has been competing until last season very much in the under-23 rankings. And now Noah Hoffman, a more experienced teammate from Aspen in Colorado, competed here in the World Championships last year, but really didn't make any impression, was barely in the top 30 in any of the races in which he participated. And this year, well, he was in the top 20 in Toblach in the 10-kilometre freestyle race, but I do think that he's actually a better freestyler than he is classic racer. Yoshida for Japan from Sapporo. Well, this is a man who, I would say, contrary to Noah Hoffman, is better in classic than he is in freestyle.
I think he is, but looking through his past results, you see that his strength really is on the big, greater distance, maybe out even the 50-kilometre. Did well here last year, 17th position, and that was in the classic style.
Jens Bormann, junior world silver medalist over today's distance and in classic, and that was in Val di Fiemme in 2014. Actually, that's Bernhard Tritscher. I was getting ahead of myself because I was looking forward to seeing Jens Bormann, who represents Sweden. Sweden, who've not had a great season, and here's the man I was looking for, Mike. And this could be one of their future stars. As I said, a medal in the Junior Worlds a couple of seasons ago, and also in the Under-23 Worlds. He was top 10 in the skiathlon last season in Kazakhstan.
And you know, David, I think Sweden is looking for the talent to come through from the younger age. They need to rebuild the team. World Championships here last year, and quite honestly, in terms of their history in cross-country racing, they've had a very poor outing, very poor season so far, the Swedes.
Graham Killick, who squeezed into the top 30 last weekend in the men's 50-kilometre race last Sunday, just got one World Cup point for all of his energy and efforts. And next away will be another of the Swedes, Anton Lindblad, wearing bib number 9, and Adrian Bachscheider there for France, pumping himself up.
Well, you need to be certainly well warmed up. There is a warm-up track 150 metres up from the start line on the left, where they're all spinning around, keeping their heartbeats up and doing a few sprints to get them used to this. But they need to get the body up and ready for this attack.
And this, the stadium that was redesigned for last year's World Championships, worked very well. It was a very compact stadium, but that gave the spectators a lot to enjoy about the racing. They could really keep in touch with the athletes. So as we get underway here, we have time checks at 1.7 kilometres, 3.2 kilometres, 5 kilometres when they come back into the stadium, and 6.7 kilometres.
Good start there, and an aggressive start from Svanebo, 31-year-old. Well, Bachscheider just opening up the lungs, getting as much air in as he can, ready to release from the beep. You can start any time within the 5 seconds of that time. You can see it on the clock as you're about to set off.
Yeah, the French who've been making names for themselves recently, particularly Baptiste Gros in the sprint division, and now Russia, Nikolaev. Well, the Russians have got the talents to be part of this, particularly the likes of Sergei Ustugov.
Well, they have, and Vilijanin last year taking the victory over the 15-kilometre classic, followed by the 15 freestyle, the skiathlon.
I said in the introduction, Mike, of course, Jonsrud Sundby from Norway, very much the dominant figure, but he did have one big hiccup, didn't he, in the Tour de Ski in Oberstdorf, where he was knackered, basically.
I thought he did so well to come back. Luckily, there was a day's rest after that, but he really did melt down. He had complete fatigue throughout his whole body and dropped back. I think it was, the 23rd position he crossed the line, and he just had nothing to give. Tried to take the early pace, but the body didn't follow the brain's instruction to keep on leading.
Snow intensifying here. This is just about as heavy as it's been all morning, and now into the early part of the afternoon. Wearing bib 14, Salvadori for Italy. It's interesting, the Italians very definitely with a new generation of racers.
And I think they need that as well. They stayed with their old reliables. Dicenta here last year at age, 42, so they stuck with the old squad for so long. And I think it's a good idea to bring in young and talented athletes such as Salvadori.
Well, I think it's really necessary. We've seen this year the domination of the Norwegians, and it's perfectly clear that unless some of the other nations, like Sweden, like Italy, really bring on their new talent, the Norwegians are just going to continue to make hay.
Well,
Norway's got the biggest reservoir of talent through their club system of any nation in the world.
And I think so. And success breeds success. The information that the World Cup team has is always passed down in Norway to the coaches, so it's spread around the country. And that's why they keep on creating champions.
And just at this moment in time, even if you decided to limit the number of Norwegian participants, I still think you'd see them coming to the fore.
Yes, they would. Kruger, silver medalist at the under-23 champs around this time last year, over 15 freestyle that was, but he's also very strong in the classic technique.
Nikita Sturpak for Russia. So Jens Berman up the first 1700 metres in 4:44. Well, Mike, it's early days, but if you were tackling this race, how do you think you'd go about it in these particular conditions?
It's an interesting one. You look at the profile, and without a doubt, the major feature is the massive 65-metre in total height climb over the 300, and that takes you up to 1700 metres down the track. So I think the strategy for most will be, let's warm into it, get our pace, get our stride into it, get over the top of that first rise, and then really open up, then start your race after that. If you hit that first climb too hard, you will suffer later, it will kick back. And we did see that earlier in the women's race. Some of those who went so hard early on, they tied up in the last 1.5 kilometre. Twice around here for the men, though.
It was interesting watching Astrid Jakobsen, finishing in 4th place, and she ran a really good race, but clearly it had taken a lot out of her. And then you saw Teresa Johaug at the end saying, well, I'm in great shape and it's fine, and I really like this hill, and they made this hill for me, and I mean, that's the one thing I would say, Mike. If I was designing a course and hosting it, the last thing I'd do is design a track which is perfectly made for the top Norwegian.
Oh, well, and you know what? I love Therese Johaug's attitude. Most other people in the race were thinking, oh, that climb, Murder Hill, we have to do that once, we have to do it twice, but she turns it into a positive, that I love that hill and I will be the strongest up that hill. And it's exactly what she did.
So Anton Lindblad, the fastest up the first of the climbs there, 4:44.1, just half a second quicker than teammate Jens Berman. And then Artem Nikolaev of Russia a couple of seconds back. Graham Killick of Canada 4 seconds off, but very early days here, and such a big field.
Helge Stad just starting there. It's also interesting how the Norwegians bring those who have done well in Tromsø at the National Championships 2 weekends ago, bringing them into the race.
Well, this is the Junior World 10-kilometre Classic champion of a couple of seasons ago going through there, and that's quite encouraging, I have to say.
Jean-Marc Gaillard, not renowned for his classic, more for his freestyle, and quite an early bib number. But the track now has been well pressed in. All this new snow falling shouldn't pose too much of a problem for Gaillard. Not the most dynamics of start. We've seen some before him. Lindblad won, who really attacked from the gun.
I would have thought this is too short for Jean-Marc Gaillard. I mean, he's a man who really needs the longer distances.
30s, 50s.
Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely. 32 signing on to keeping it clean in racing there was Alexander Legkov, the Olympic champion over 50 kilometers from Sochi. And Boerman, you can see, with the lead. And now Lindblad, who was ahead of him at 1700 meters, but only by half a second. And you can see that Boerman has really profited.
He certainly has. Lindblad in his club suit, not his national team suit. Again, just being invited, and the host nation able to race, I think, 8-10 more athletes, enter them into the field.
Yeah, just at this moment of time, Jens Boerman is our pathfinder on this race. And Matti Häkkinen for Finland. Well, almost invisible this season.
Very much so. Are they going to make a comeback? Are they going to make a surge for their championships, world champs next year in Falun, in Lahti?
Yeah, well, as you saw there on the little graphic, he was 15-kilometre classic champion in Oslo in the championships of 2011. And there are a number of racers who've got on the easy side this season to get ready for what is an intense campaign, 2 very big years in a row. First the Nordics in Lahti, then South Korea and the Olympic Games. Hellner, well, similarly, look at that, three-time Olympic champion. What have we seen from Hellner this year?
Very little. We've seen his name on start lists, and then he doesn't start. He hasn't been well, David. He's had so many setbacks, and we hope by starting today we're seeing him almost at his best. He did come second in the Norwegian national, Swedish national champs 2 weekends ago, over 15-kilometre classic. Double poling a long way out of the climb after the start.
Anders Glursen on his way, and I can tell you up the first climb to 1.7 kilometers. Simon Kruger, the under-23 silver medalist last year from Almaty in Kazakhstan in the 15-kilometer freestyle, now the fastest man at 4:42, ahead of Lindblad and ahead of Burman by 2.6 kilometers. And now the tall Jesper Modin, who I guess we more relate to in those big sprint races, where he can really put his physique about. Modin, who in a way has been eclipsed by a lot of the Swedes and hasn't made Swedish selection, but now Legkov, well, I don't know what you can make of this today. He's raced pretty decently this season, but he's never really looked like winning.
He's been frustrated. I think we saw that last weekend in Oslo as well. He was desperate to stay with the lead group. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't able to stay with the lead group. And I think he will be wanting a statement before the end of the season that I am back, I'm still here, I'm still in the races.
Yes, finished 9th in Oslo, and here's Kruger setting that new early mark there. Now he was 2.6 seconds ahead of Burman. Here he comes in that red suit, and he's doubled the advantage.
I love his techniques, the explosive drive where he's compressing the bow off the ski down. He's really dynamic at that reaction.
And this is what frightens everybody, doesn't it? You know, you find a good Swede and then you find an even better young Norwegian.
For every good Swede, you've got 20 good Norwegians, I would say.
So, Turnseth, as you can see, happy memories from Falun, having medalled in the relay team. I think this is a great cross-country centre, Mike. You know, I think apart from the weather, which was the disappointment, that was the only disappointment, because the quality of racing last year in the World Championships was extremely high. And what the Swedes have done by regenerating the whole of this area for last year's World Championships, we have some terrific tracks.
We do, and the stadium, I think, there is no need to alter it again, certainly over the next 20 years. World-class, and here's a world-class athlete, second last weekend over 50 kilometres, and only, what, in the end, 10 seconds behind the amazing Sundby. 18 seconds, in fact.
Deerhaug, who was top 10 in the skiathlon here a year ago, currently 5th in the overall season-long rankings. Ran a terrific race, didn't he, in Oslo, finishing in 2nd place. And he said, I remember him saying, he said, that is the hardest race of my life.
He was 13th here in the 50-kilometre last year, although, well, that was classic as well. But yes, that 50-kilometre in Oslo has to be the biggest test for anybody, for any cross-country skier. And to get on the podium is a huge credit.
Well, we talk about the Swedish racers, a rejuvenation of their team. You could play or apply the same comment to the Finns. Alex Harvey, I've got a feeling that Alex Harvey might have a good run. I mean, he didn't set the world alight in Stockholm last weekend, but he's in pretty reasonable shape at the moment.
He's always there or thereabouts, and Novo Mesto, or the World Cup, really, after the Tour de Ski, 4th in the 15-kilometre, but that was freestyle.
Yeah, he just missed the final in Stockholm. He was 7th in the classic sprint on Thursday. But it's hard because all the big guns are really following him, so they obviously have an advantage to know how he's doing, but nonetheless, I think he could have a decent race here. Eric Björnsson, another of the North Americans, this time for the United States.
His sister raced out earlier this morning in the women's field, Sadie.
So signing on, Sergei Turishev. Now Belov. Now this is interesting. What do you reckon about Belov's chances today?
Every time I watch Belov racing, I really believe in this man, and I do quite honestly expect him to win some races, but he always seems to have issues. In the sprint races, he's made mistakes, errors, he falls. I really hope it goes well for him today. He certainly has the potential to podium. Just going back to Belov, the amount of medals that he won at junior and under-23 World Championships, it's as good as we get in the junior category, and he hasn't quite translated that into his senior racing.
Yeah, but he could also make that comment about Ustigov as well. And here is Helgestad for Norway. That's a decent start up there. And at the moment, the man who's fastest up the first element, the first examination, Martin Nget for Norway, 4:38.2, and that's almost 4 seconds ahead of his teammate Kruger. Sandwiched between them is Matti Heikkinen, who's just about a second off at the first 1,700 meters.
7.8 seconds. I think Gaillard will be okay, quite happy with that.
I think he's a better racer in a mass start where he can hunt.
That's his mentality. His mind focus is better when he's chasing or holding on.
3,300 kilometers from the finish there, and Jens Boerman has the big disadvantage of starting so early, but I think he's having a pretty good race at the moment. Boerman just having a look at where he sits in the table. He would be about 6 seconds down on Turnset, which isn't bad.
It's not bad at all. Interesting, Martin Jacks there, who normally is good over 10 kilometers. He's been absorbed, he's been caught already by 30 seconds. Now his job is to try and stick in there in the slipstream of Nyenget.
Now Heikkinen, this is interesting. Heikkinen 28 and Nyenget for Norway 27 there, and there was only literally a second between them up the first 1,700 meters. So Nyenget there 8:33.1. So Heikkinen, he's lost a little bit. He's lost just about 1.7 seconds, but that's not damaging at the moment.
It's not. Heikkinen, he did. He won the world champion, as you mentioned, back in 2011 in Oslo. And his coaches say, well, we really don't know day to day, but he will have a very, very good day occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 times in a season. And certainly his start was looking good today.
Well, in that race, the 15-kilometer classic where Sundby bombed out, he was actually 7th in that 15-kilometer classic race, and that's just pretty well his best result of the season.
Interesting. Hellner, I think when you're 9 seconds off the pace in the early stages, you won't be feeling so positive. Or is he pacing it sensibly? I'm not sure. I think we would have seen him up there with the best time so far if he was on for one of his best days.
Yeah, Hellner, who missed out on the bronze medal in the 15-kilometer freestyle race here in Falun in the World Championships last year. So getting ever closer to the big guns. Here's one of them, Vilekjanin. And Vilekjanin wearing 48 and Sundby wearing bib number 58. And between them, we've got Francesco De Fabiani, Ustigov about to start, Finn Hagen, Kroh not far away, Hans Christer Holland, and also Devon Kershaw, not seeded, but in there. But Devon's had a disappointing season.
He has, and what is it, 3-4 years ago, when in the early part of the Tour de Ski, for the first 5 days, he was doing so well and up in the top 5.
Legkoff, 4 seconds off at 1.7 kilometers, behind that man, Nguet, and 3.6. So he hasn't lost anything, he's gained a fraction.
I think it's a good start from Legkoff. He set out with intent, he's still got his intention there, and fighting very hard. He's quite a heavy athlete, so the extreme hill won't suit him too much.
Now this young man is fearless. Like Stina Nielsen, he's wearing the bib in the men's division for the leader of the under-23 World Cup rankings for the season. An interesting innovation, but it's another challenge. It's something to keep those men, as they graduate out of junior into senior, to keep them interested and occupied in 2 or 3 years, where historically a number of racers have left the sport.
That is true, and he's certainly doing well, and be interesting to see how he copes with the time trial format. He's very much a mass start man, hangs on to the person in front of him.
So, Turnsteth, he's turned a 0.1 deficit into a 0.3 advantage over the last 1,500 metres.
I have to say, David, he's making it look easy. When you compare the body language to Legkoff, Turnsteth made it look like an easy distance session.
Well, there is exactly what I was saying. You can see triple under-23 world champion Sergei Ustigov, but he has graduated. When you look at the situation, there he is lying in 4th overall in the World Cup rankings for the season, albeit, Mike, that, you know, he's 952 points behind Sundby there, but then everybody's behind Sundby. Everybody is behind this man. What is he going to deliver today?
Well, there is the great man. What an amazing season he's having. What an amazing the 3 seasons he's had.
Yes, unlike the Women's World Cup, where you could see that Teresa Juhak has to keep working because she's being chased hard by the likes of Ersberg and Weng. Sundby's got a clear advantage, and his advantage over this man, Finn Hågen Krogh, 670 points. Emil Iversen of Norway, now the fastest up the first 1,700 metres in 4:36.2. Didrik Turnsteth, the quickest, through at the second check at 3.2 kilometres. At 5 kilometres, it is Simon Kruger in 12:52. And at 7 kilometres, he's also the quickest man. He's some 30 seconds ahead of the young Swede Jens Berman. So one or two of them getting close to the finish of this race. First man is across the line, Sinzov of Bulgaria in 27:07. Hans Christer Holland. Eighth best in the distance rankings. So far this season, just one podium, and that came in Lillehammer in the skiathlon there, the 15 kilometers freestyle and 15 kilometers classic. '57 in picture there, Devon Kershaw.
He's still only 33, and although we mentioned he's had a little dip in performance this season, I'd love to see him come back today to get some of his feel-good factor back. He is the ultimate fighter. When he's on form, he can take himself to an incredible level.
As you see, the tour leader about to start.
Now, has that 50-kilometer, David, the incredible performance he gave us last Sunday, in fact, has that taken anything out of him?
Well, it's interesting that the tour graphic indicates that he's well on his way to a 3rd consecutive tour title. By the way, Alexander Besmetnik of Russia now, 4:35, and Iversen.
Well, that's a destruction of the field. 13.6 is huge.
Yeah, I'm just Iversen 13.6 ahead of his Norwegian T-weight Turnset. Ninget of Norway in third place, Kruger in fourth. So Norway beginning to make their presence felt. And here is this young, promising Swede. And takes the lead away from Yoshida, but not, I fancy, for too long. But I think that's a decent effort from starting that early.
Well, Niskanen 9.9 behind. He's in the bracket to be able to improve and move forward on that, and getting the split times of Iversen, setting the fastest time.
Two Frenchmen accompanying each other, and what you've got there is Jean-Marc Gaillard tucking in to try and get a good ride from Valentin Chauvin. So up Murderbacken for the second time, Mike.
That's got to be painful, and Ninget just spreading the skis. His head has dropped down much more than when we saw him come up it the first time. You could just see the pain, the discomfort there in his face. It is better if you can keep your head up. It allows more oxygen down into the lungs, and it keeps the hips forward to get the grip. You so much need this grip on the 26% in terms of steepness climb.
Well, I'll tell you what, it underlines Kruger's run, and Iversen at 3.2 kilometers there, and Besmetnik, who was quicker than him up the first 1,700 meters, having now lost, well, Iversen was only 0.8 of a second behind Besmetnik, but a complete turnaround there.
Well, although this part of the track looks quite easy, it's not. The gradient here, you certainly feel it. Double poling into this final 100 meters of rise.
Well, Villajani looking zestful.
He looked good last Sunday as well, didn't he? He tried so hard. There was a break of 4 in the 50-kilometer. He tried for so long to stay with it. He dropped back to fourth, and then he fought his way back up into third. He's going to be there or thereabouts. In fact, no, he's dropping down over 10 seconds.
Emil Iversen. Well, this is quite a remarkable run at the moment that we're seeing from him. He can sprint, and he can also do the distances. And you might remember that Iversen was the winner in the Tour de Ski of that 1,200-meter classic sprint. And that's obviously his best result of the season.
He took a great line. The energy he carried on to, he didn't expect to get into the final. He didn't expect to win the race, but he found the magic just in the final 250 meters of that particular race.
Yeah, he was also 6th in Val di Fiemme, also in the Tour de Ski in the Mastart Classic race over 15,000 meters.
Sundby, always looking so relaxed, head looking way up the hill rather than the head down.
Look at the way he's doing this, Mike. I mean, look at that upper body, absolutely straight up the hill, no horizontal movement at all. And Sundby really dancing up Murderbacken.
Yeah, and then look at Ledkov. Ledkov's realizing that if he can get in the slipstream of Sundby, if it's at all possible, it's going to assist him in his final part of his race. Well, Ledkov is finding some inspiration there, realizing that he could be dragged on. Of course, Sundby 1 lap fresher leg than he is.
Yeah, Sundby, who started 30 seconds after Devon Kershaw, has reeled the Canadian in double quick.
That's in really quick time, 1.75 kilometer to the top of the first time up Murderbacken.
Sundby up Murderbacken and through the first 1,700 metres. Sundby 3.2 seconds ahead of Besmertnik, and the gap exactly when you come to the 3.2 kilometre point, Besmertnik behind Iversen. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Sundby does in the next 1,500 metres.
This is lovely skiing from Tunseth, and the gear change was magnificent. The easier terrain, then the steeper terrain, he absolutely pumped the tempo.
Tunseth there about 6 seconds behind Sundby, and behind Iversen about 13-14 seconds to make. I still think, Mike, that this would be a much more enjoyable race in a funny sort of way if this was a mass start, because I think the crowd here could get real enjoyment. They're a knowledgeable crowd, but it's very difficult for them, as it is for us, to actually get a feeling of how this race is unfolding, because it's such a large field and so much talent. It's really tricky to predict who's going to, be up there fighting it out, other than the fact that the form says that Norway are going to be pretty strong come the end of the race in the top 10.
They certainly are, and it would be a different kind of race, and you would have many more people glued together, stuck together at the sharp end. It would be a pack of 30 at this point, or at half distance for sure.
Well, for my money, that's what I'd opt for.
Very difficult, over 10 kilometres, very difficult to get past, very difficult to earn your position.
Yeah, I think that all comes in the course design, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The way that we haven't got a shortage of snow, so you can easily make an 8-metre wide track here
without a doubt. And as I say, it would be a different, against the clock, it brings in a different race personality, a different race strategy.
This doesn't quite tell the story.
Well, that's got to be a good feeling coming down in towards the home straight, having covered the terrain, almost 400 metres of climb from start to finish line.
Yeah, Burman in second place, Yoshida of Japan third, as you can see, and Katz coming in now, representing Germany, the front of these two, but misses the podium.
Just thinking, David, there, if this was the year 2007, we'd be seeing Germany, certainly Angerer winning so often in the World Cup, and a number of other Germans getting on the podium.
Now, Sundby, 1,700 metres, he had 4-second advantage over Iversen. And look what's happened there, as you rightly said, Iversen through the kitchen sink between 1,700 and 3,200 metres.
Really picked it up. The advantage for Sundby is he's getting the split time from the best of the rest of the world, and that's got to be an advantage.
But of course, the other point that you were making, Mike, is that if you actually are a little bit too aggressive on the first of the rotations, you may well pay for it second time around.
And I think that's where Sundby was being very clever. He didn't have the body language to say that he was on maximum. He was absolutely keeping control of this race, I think. And then probably second time round he's going to open up into his full pace tempo.
Well, here is Iversen at 6.7 kilometres. So having come out of the stadium, going up the Murderbacken climb for the second time.
You just sense that Sundby on that same climb on the second time round is going to be a little smoother. He's going to have the strength to keep the technique in the right place at the right time.
So Jean-Marc Gaillard into the lead ahead of Helgestedt. Kruger in third place for Norway. Jens Burman, the best for Sweden, drops to fourth. Yoshida, the best for Japan, drops into fifth place. Iversen being chased by Bulegjanin at 5 kilometres by both Bulegjanin 5.3 seconds back, Ustugov 5.9, Besmertnik 6.6, Torishev of Russia 12.1.
Heikkinen, it is a good day for Heikkinen. Maybe won't threaten the podium at the end of the race, but for now it's going to be the new lead time.
So Heikkinen chasing the Frenchman in the blue and pretty solidly into the lead.
Actually, I'm just thinking, David, the way that Heikkinen approached the final, or attacked the final 2.5, maybe that's it might be a top 5 position, as we maybe suggested on his really good day he could achieve, possibly even a podium.
At half distance, he was 20 seconds behind Iversen and 15 behind Velekjanin. So let's keep it in perspective. And now Iversen, who at 3.2 kilometers was 6 seconds ahead of Besmertnik, and there you can see very much the same.
Yeah, and I like the style, Besmertnik. When you watch his classic style, it's efficient. He's so tall, he covers so much ground on each stride.
Coming towards the finish of his run now, and Anders Glersen. Glersen never figuring in the top half of the order right the way through the race. And you can see going to lose quite a few places in a moment.
He hasn't looked in this race his former self. He looks tired. He's they are all tired at this time of the season, but he just hasn't looked as sparky as we normally see him.
Velekjanin. Now, the last time we saw him, he was 5 seconds behind Iversen. And he was ahead of Besmertnik by some 6 points. Well, no, not by just about a second and a half.
Very composed, very controlled skiing from Velekjanin over the high point.
So Iversen, Sundby, Besmertnik, and now coming into the equation is also Maurice Magnificat. 7 seconds down on Iversen, 6 on Sundby, and Ustugov, the best of the Russians, ahead of Niskanen in the early stages, the best of the Finns. So the leading challengers now beginning to... There's a shape to the race which is now beginning to develop. And Turnseth, some 13 and a half seconds down on Iversen, his Norwegian teammate. But nonetheless into the lead. Besmertnik, by the way, ahead of Iversen now at 6.7 kilometers. Besmertnik 7.6 seconds up. So that's just having a look at that, that's a 13-second turnaround in favor of Besmertnik.
I'll tell you, that's a huge turnaround late on in the race. So Besmertnik has absolutely paced it beautifully. Just needs to negotiate this hill. He's quite a giant of a man, a lot of mass to lift up this big climb.
Well, remember, he was my pick in Oslo last weekend, and the Russians who decided to stay out, we thought one rotation too long instead of changing the skis, and it certainly cost them position and the chance of a podium.
Yeah, classic style, and Besmertnik is a Dierhaug, only 2.2, and his efforts on Sunday over the 50-kilometer must have left him drained for the best part recovering this week. Still good.
That's real pain. When you see an athlete roll over like that and put a leg in the air, that's pain. And this is very early in the race now, and it doesn't really reflect where we are at this particular moment, because you can see that Iversen there is indicated ahead. Maurice Magnificat This is a good race from Maurice because, again, we regard him as being a better freestyle skater than we do a classic racer. But maybe at 5 kilometers he can really survive. And he actually has been choosing his races a little bit more prudently. He's not trying to race everything. Remember, the French didn't get involved in Oslo last weekend.
Well, not a bad idea. Those distances do take a huge amount out of you, and I think that's why we're seeing Sundby today, well, second place after 5 kilometers, but not quite at his best. Well, Finnhagen Krok looking like he's having a troubled time, and certainly the pace indicating that very sentiment. Ever the fighter, trying to adjust his technique there. He was desperately trying to tell himself to keep the head up, and then the head went back down again.
Ustigov has lost ground. Besmertnik staying really strong at the moment, and that big turnaround over Iversen. And remember, the last time we saw Sundby, he was behind Iversen, but as you said, it'll be very interesting to see Sundby second time up Murderback in the big hill.
I think this is good, very good from Bjørnsen. Absolutely in the race. Turnset's time will stand, I think, a top 5, top 6.
Well, he's got Dirhag behind him at the moment in the clubhouse, and then Matti Häkkinen, Jean-Marc Gaillard. And here comes Sundby up Murderbacken. So, right, Mike,
well,
body language this time around.
Well, how composed. I think we believe that he would be much smoother, much easier than most of the rest, and it's not an easy ride for him. He's going to have to keep his pace strong if he wants to match Besmertnik.
I remember Besmertnik had turned it round after this between himself and Iversen, and Sundby and Besmertnik pretty well at the same race pace. I think the Russian, well, he's got the disadvantage, hasn't he, of being ahead on the track. So Sundby can feed off his splits. But on the other hand, is Sundby going to be as strong as Besmertnik towards the end of the race? This is really interesting.
Well, look at that, the coach running alongside, giving him exactly the information that he so badly needs right now.
Only 3,300 meters to go, and it's worth remembering in the diagram of this course, you've got these nasty little spike up hills to come.
There are. Thankfully, after the top of the rise, you've got a good 700 meters of relatively easy terrain. So for Sundby's benefit, he will get some pullback, some clawback of feeling in his legs after that. This is great from Magnifica.
Yeah, and we'll get a comparison of his position in a moment.
Now, this is him today, David, saying, listen, I am at the races when it comes to classic. Normally, we only ever favour him when it comes to freestyle.
So he's 4 seconds behind Besmertnik and Sundby, who are virtually locked together. And he's a couple of seconds, 2-3 seconds ahead of Iversen, and maybe 3 to 4 ahead of Verlegjanin, and 14 ahead of Turnset. Iversen into the lead in the finish, 25 minutes 22. And he's gone in 11 seconds ahead of Turnset. And that means that he actually lost 2-3 seconds on the way to the finish. But here comes Besmertnik now. And Besmertnik, of course, who turned it around with Iversen at 6,700 meters. He had a 6 second advantage, 6 to 7 second advantage. And Besmertnik needs to double pole for his life here, and he's gone into, well, in fact, that's Johansson. We had where's Besmertnik?
No, that is Besmertnik there.
Yeah, I was going to say,
captions all wrong.
Yeah, that was very confusing. So Besmertnik from Russia, 4 seconds ahead of Iversen, 15 ahead of Turnset. Turishev of Russia off the podium in fourth place. Dirhaug of Norway, 17 back in 5th. Häkkinen of Finland, 18 seconds back. Gaillard, and now Verlegjanin.
Well, advantage Verlegjanin. We saw him off the early pace by some 10-15 seconds, and brilliantly paced race here. He's really opened up, and I think he's going to take his fellow teammate.
Well, he had a 7 second deficit behind Besmertnik 3 kilometers ago. So he really has speeded up here, and it's going to be Russia 1 and 2, and Velekjanin ahead of Besmetnik, who we saw, Mike, coming into the finish, definitely lost speed.
He did, and the final rise over the bridge climb for Besmetnik, his skis definitely weren't gripping as much. He was slipping and losing half a second.
So we got Magnificat out there, we got Sundby out there. Iversen is home, he's now down into third place. Who else could be a threat? Well, Ustigov, I think, has got too much to do. I think it's all about Sundby and Magnificat at this particular point.
When it comes
Russia 1 and 2.
When it comes to the cornering and the descents, Magnificat, with his alpine skiing background from when he was a kid, he really does take the corners well. I think in fairness as well, David, you can see the track becoming glazed, you can see it shining, the snow had stopped, and I believe there is a factor there where the skis on this descent back to the stadium have a slight advantage later in the race.
And Fabiani about 30 seconds back with 3,000 meters to go. No, it's not Pellegrino, it's the Fabiani. I don't think this would be Pellegrino's cup of tea.
They do look similar, the same build, similar looks.
It's not bad, he's the top Italian, squeezing in for the moment to the top 10, but I think he's going to get pushed out before this day is done. And now Ustigov chasing Velekjanin, and the difference in Velekjanin's favour 3 kilometres ago was the best part of 9 seconds. So here you're going to get a demonstration of how well Velekjanin actually finished the race.
Ustigov, he is a tired man, the Tour de Ski, his efforts there, and then almost every race since then. And the fall in Stockholm in the sprint, he was looking so strong, but he tripped over his own skis. I think that was the semi-final.
So the Olympic silver medalist from the 50 in Sochi, behind Alexander Lenkov, leading this race. And remember, of course, in Falun last year, Velekjanin fourth in the 50-kilometre classic as well here, but the gold medal in the skiathlon. So he's got to count this place as you know, a happy hunting ground.
And look what's happening here, David. Sundby has got all the information and he's reacting. He's trying to put a final sprint up this very steep, very difficult climb within the stadium.
Yeah, but he's got a 7-second advantage. That's what he had with 3,300 meters to go. But he will have got the message that this man is leading the way now. Sundby's got to finish really strongly to deny this man. And this is where we need to really stay with Sundby. Here we are. And what we really need is a running clock on this, Mike.
We certainly do, but this is the final steep climb, which is coming up to now, and just getting back into a stride now. Well,
doesn't tell us much, because Iversen is now not relevant to the party. Iversen's still in third place. Still looks to have plenty of energy.
He's amazing. He just, his skis weren't running well there or gripping well, so he altered his technique once again. He is the master of reading the terrain.
But when he did that, his balance was so good.
He's so strong. It's one aspect he's worked so much in the gym, is getting the balance and the line through the leg to give easy balance, easy movement.
So, Krog, never really been in the firing line here, and you can see the deficit's a big one. 25th place, probably will stay within the World Cup points range. And look at this for a charge.
The face, the grimacing, he's trying to keep it controlled.
Look how flexible his body is.
He's created himself so strong, but I think we might be looking at a Russian victory today. It's going to be to the line, and Sumbi knows that. He's got the advantage because he knows exactly what he has to do.
100 metres, 14 seconds less than that in which to get home. And these are little losses of time here.
He's thrown it.
He's blown it, hasn't he?
He absolutely has. The change of track, it lost him a half a second, and he hasn't got a half a second to play with.
So Velejanin, surely this is going to be his victory, and Sundby, you can see there, just into fourth place, but in fact behind Besmertnik, behind Iversen.
Well, the finish, I think we said, the finish pace from Velejanin was outstanding. He took the first quarter of the race within himself. Can Magnificat change things?
Yeah, Magnificat 4 seconds to make up, and just under 30 in which to get home, and there's the all-important bridge. He's got to swing into the finish straight as well. Tucks down, and this is going to be a real test of his strength there. Just a little bit back on his heels. Now, can he get onto the podium, I wonder? He's got to be something like 25-21 to get onto the podium.
I don't think so.
No. Well, this is first place that's gone. Second place has gone. Has he got third? Yes, he's got third.
Well, Everton, he'll be so disappointed to be knocked down into the fourth position.
Yeah, but that's really good to see French racer into third place and on the podium.
And in the classic style, well done, Magnificat. He can take himself to a real pain place.
Right, Mike, this season, when did a Norwegian not finish on the podium?
It hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened. It has here.
Well, so close though when you look at Sumbi's only 9.5 seconds behind, but fifth place.
Yeah, but look at that. Iversen fourth, Sundby fifth, Turnseth sixth place, and Deerhaug in eighth place. But it's Legjanin, Besmertnik, and Magnificat. Well, I've got to say, Mike, I'm absolutely delighted because the three men on the podium have proved that Norway are not invincible.
Well, they certainly have looked invincible to this point in the season, and what a difference a venue makes. The positivity Velejanin had from here last year, where he won the skiathlon, only won it by a fraction of a second, but he won it, and he carried that positivity that he loves this track, this terrain, and this location.
And of course it's his first success of the season, and a big boost for the Russians because they've been knocking on the door the last few weeks. And there you have it, his seventh career win. And Legjanin at the age of 33, very much at the height of his powers, and clearly Falun is somewhere he really likes. He gets on with this place really well. So, Boris Magnificat, what can you say, Mike? I mean, he's a terrific athlete, and, you know, I'm glad to see him on the table. And then Besmertnik there, three excellent racers.
I don't think many people could have predicted the outcome of this race, especially Magnificat, with the absolute respect for the man. His weakness, the only weak area, is the fact that he isn't as good in classic as he is in freestyle.
Yeah, but he was a silver medalist here in Falun, so maybe at the beginning of the day we should have been looking at the people who did well in Falun, because he was the silver medalist in the 15-kilometre freestyle race here a year ago, or pretty well a year ago.
And that was in difficult conditions. The earlier starters had an advantage that day, and he really worked hard with a late start number to get that medal.
So Velejanin forced to sit in the comfy chair. What about Besmertnik, Mike? I mean, you could say just a little bit unfortunate, but on the other hand, Velejanin, the better man on the day. I mean, you know, he's 29, same age as Magnificat, and he was a runner-up in Toblach in the 15-kilometre classic. And again, this is 10 today, but proving that this sort of test and this sort of journey is very much to his liking.
Yes, and it is the classic. His strength is the classic style. We saw that last weekend. Besmetnik, you mentioned, I think the Russians agreed they got their strategies wrong. They tried to stay on the same pair of skis for too long when they had the option to change skis, and tactically they got that a little wrong. And of course, Velicianin last week, he showed that he had good form with his third position in the 50-kilometre.
Yeah, Besmetnik, who ended up in 16th place. But there's nobody out there that's going to overtake. What I want to do, Mike, is to perhaps go down the order and see about a few personal bests here. Well, you know, I mentioned Jens Burman, the Swede. He's actually ended up at the moment in 23rd place, so he's in the World Cup points, and he's finished only 1 minute and 8.6 seconds, and he's taken the scalp of Legkov and Marcus Hellner.
I think that's and you know, I think that will gain him a place.
I remember where he started, bib number 7.
It definitely wasn't easier in that first part of the race. The snowfall for those people trailblazing at the front, it was not the easy journey to have a low start number.
Eric Björnsson, United States, 20th place, 1 minute off. That's not bad. And also Uli Schlieder for Switzerland, 64 seconds back. Of course, no Dario Colonia, and hopefully Dario can get himself in shape for the Tour of Canada. Last man at the moment to get a point is Perttu Huvarinen of Finland. So we'll desert you for a moment and then come back to wrap up this Russian success. Well, Mike, Sundby, hard race last week, didn't prosper here last year. Well, are we seeing a turning point?
The great thing with Sundby, we mentioned at the start of the programme, he had a bad day on the Tour de Ski, finished in 23rd position, and give him a day off, give him a day's recovery, he was back to his winning days the next day. But without a doubt, David, he's absolutely fatigued. He tried to give his normal, but there was nothing, there was no reaction in the body when he needed it most in the final 1 kilometre. So he absolutely is a tired man, as we would expect. And with the way that he led most of the 50-kilometre last Sunday was an incredible work rate and feat of endurance.
Well, I'll tell you what, third place for Magnificat. And tomorrow, what are we doing? 15 kilometres freestyle, where he was the silver medalist here last year.
Feel good factor. Man on form.
And then, of course, next weekend we've got the races in Lahti, the freestyle sprint, and also the skiathlon. And, you know, that takes them up to the 21st of February. And then they've got a bit of a break before they get over on the 1st of March to Canada. And I think that you've got to take into account the travelling and the reacclimatization, because the whole, this is, you know, they could have very different weather, very different conditions in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it's most likely to be a lot colder, but I think the saving grace for Sundby is that break in between.
Plenty of Norwegians, but it's not been their day, and we've not said that all season. It's Velicianin Saturday, and Besmetnik a 1-2 for Russia. Maurice Magnificat, an excellent third there ahead of Emil Iversen, the best of the Norwegians. There's Jens Burman in 23rd place ahead of the Olympic champion Legkov, Hellner, and then you come down to Huvarinen in 30th place, the last man to get a World Cup point. Well, Velicianin, really the story of the race. Just a pity, Mike, that between 6.7 kilometres and the finish, we didn't see too much of him.
It is a pity. Four Russians in the top 10, though. That's good news for the Russian team.
And it tells you that their service team are also absolutely on the money as well. There's Maurice Magnificat. 15 kilometres freestyle tomorrow. Silver medalist last year. Worth a few, Bob?
He's got to be feeling good about himself.
Besmertnik, that upright stance there, part of his style of skiing, and clearly disappointing not to win the race, but pretty happy to be on the podium, and again, particularly after last week's disappointment in Oslo. And Legjanin with a terrific rhythm, Mike, all the way through this race, and managed his energy perfectly. So that's all we have for you today from Falun, but Mike and myself will be back tomorrow for freestyle racing here at the Nordic Ski World Centre. For now though, bye-bye from Sweden.
50 000 kronor som går till den person som på ett spännande sätt bidrar till en positiv samhällsutveckling i länet.